Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to our Baatein session with Ahlawat Gunjan. He's flown in from Delhi to be with us today, and we look forward to a very special conversation. Gunjan's visit to NID, of course, is not just a visit, but a homecoming of sorts. He's been a student here, and today he's visiting us as a speaker, and he's going to share his journey as a creative director and an artist and a designer. Gunjan is currently the creative head at Penguin Random House India. He has a master's degree in graphic design from the Glasgow School of Art, UK, and prior to that was a student at NID Ahmedabad. He has trained at Lars, Mullers in Switzerland, Faber and Faber, and other publishing houses. He has a very varied and interesting work experience that we're going to hear more about today. And he has designed some of the most iconic book covers for the likes of Amitav Ghosh, Ramchandra Guha, Orhan Pamuk, Ruskin, and so many others. Among his numerous prizes are the Oxford Bookstore Book Cover Prize and the Jaipur Literature Festival's Jaipur BookMark Prize. So welcome Gunjan, and we really look forward to our conversation with you today. Let's give him. So my first question is about the place that we're in today. You were a student here at NID about more than a decade ago. So how were you as a student, as an NIDian, and what was your experience here like?
Well, it was decades ago. I joined NID in 2002 as an undergraduate student. Can you hear me clearly at the back?
You can hold it.
Yeah, so that was 2002, and I remember joining as a very shy, very timid, apprehensive individual coming from Meerut. And the place does intimidate, it did intimidate me, and the pace also, but it also comforts you at the same time. And then I decided to pursue graphic design. But more than graphic design, I used to hang around in the textile studio. We were probably the last batch where the earlier lot of faculties like Vikas Satwalekar and SM Shah, Suresh and Tarun, Shilpa had the privilege to be mentored under. And also had some fascinating batchmates, seniors who constantly supported you in every small and big endeavor, whether figuring out an internship or with your graduation projects, etc., etc. So I had a tremendous time here, and I think faculty's institute provided all the possible ingredients for you to nurture in your journey. So it was really lovely.
What is your favorite part of college? Where did you hang out?
Textile studio.
And then right after that, you decided to pursue your master's in Glasgow. So
no, I think not. I think I did. I by accident I got a job at High Design Pondicherry, and which was going well, but my relationship with heat is not great, and Pondicherry used to be very hot. So I decided to move back to Delhi. I was looking for a job in Delhi, and then a senior of mine who was working at this publishing house called Dorling Dursley just asked me to sort of put in my CV, and as luck would have it, I got the job. It was again accident. I did not know anything about that time, anything about book design, but it turned out to be such a therapeutic experience, because Dorling Dursley teaches you how to manage a 200-page long book with 10,000 images and fonts, and so basically teaches you the mechanics and the modalities of book design, type design, integration, and it was just amazing. So that was my sort of a first rubbing shoulders with publishing.
And today you are the creative head at Penguin. So how did that happen? What was the journey like?
Truth be told, in 2005, Penguin even denied me an internship. And when I joined DK, and I don't know if you guys know, DK and Penguin are sister concerns. So Penguin's office used to be just next door. uh, while I was at DK, I always had that inkling that how could someone deny an internship to an NIDN. So I asked my art director at DK that if I could go and meet Penguin sometime, and of course she allowed me to do that. I went and I met the art director that time, and probably she found me a little more mature, a little more composed, and she offered me to do a freelance project for her. I started with one, and we landed up doing 4 projects together on freelance basis, and by that time I think both the parties were having similar feelings. She wanted me to join Penguin and I wanted to join Penguin, so the switch happened fortunately, and that's how I came to Penguin as a designer in 2007. But I was clear that I wanted to study further because as I said, because of my apprehensive personality, a lot of pertinent questions remain unanswered at NID, not at NID's fault at all. But and that sort of made me think that I do want to pursue further so that those questions can be answered. And then in August of 2009, I went to study further. I went to Purdue University, and I realized that the course that I was admitted to wasn't really geared for me, so I decided to quit from there. And then I also had the admission from the Glasgow School of Art. So in September of 2011, I moved to Scotland, and where I did my master's in graphic design, but keeping a focus on publishing design. And that turned out to be a therapeutic experience, really, in every form and capacity.
Quite a journey from being denied an internship. Quite a redemption arc.
That's true.
So you have also many other interests. You paint, you write, and we'll talk more about that later. So how did you decide that you want to pursue within design this specific area of book cover designing as your profession or your career choice?
Like I said, Rahi, it was an accident. It was not a prepared thing that, or when I was a student at 90, I never had a thing that one day I want to design books or I want to design logo. I don't think I had, let me be honest, that I had a clarity about that. High design happened, and then Darlington Dursley happened. High design, it was just branding stuff, and I was doing it, enjoying it. But when I was at DK, this whole idea of designing a product and giving it a form that you can actually hold, also creating something that will go into the history of literature for decades and decades, was a feeling for me. And more than DK, Penguin, I think this orange has something deep in there for me, which I still can't decode what it is, but it has a very deep effect on me. So it was when I did my first freelance cover for Penguin, when I was setting up the cover, and when I placed the logo on the front cover, it moved something in me, and I think I still live with that feeling.
Penguin certainly has a very illustrious legacy that now you are a part of. We are very excited to see some of the covers that you've designed, so if you could share perhaps some of them with us.
Sure. So hello again. So what I have done is that I have put together some, I think, 10 to 12 cover designs that have some sort of a process story or a belief story around them, and I'll walk you through them to give you a little bit of sort of an inside tour of my process and thinking, and a little story probably around each of them. So many of you may have seen this one. It's a very famous book by Ruskin, Born. And this was the special edition, marked the 60th anniversary of this award-winning book, written when the author was just 17. Heartwarming and an absolute classic, this moving story of love and friendship is for all generations. This was my first project when I joined Penguin in August of 2015 as design head. Um, the publisher wanted to have a very special cover for the 60th, to celebrate the 60th anniversary for the book. I read the book, it really moved me. It is about friendship, it is about love, it is about loss. I was so moved that I decided that I think I should go off to Missouri and spend some time with Ruskin. I packed myself for 3 days to Landor, and though I have read the book, but I discussed it with Ruskin in person for all 3 days. And I have this habit of just collecting leaves and dry flowers. And so one of the mornings when I was waiting to go to Ruskin's house, I was sitting outside under a tree and I was just collecting some flowers just for the memory's sake. Since there was a room with a red floor, and I thought I should illustrate this one personally. So I illustrated this and I was scanning the artwork on the scanner, and in my notebook there was this dry flower that fell on the scanner bed and got scanned. And the image came out with this flower on it, so I was like, oh sorry, this is an accident. I removed it and I rescanned it without a flower this time. And I composed two options, one with flower and one without flower. And Ruskin is not on email, so you have to send him printouts and a written letter. So I printed both the covers and I wrote a letter to Ruskin. And he wrote back after I think 2 weeks saying that thank you so much, and I love the one with the flower, because one thing that I missed to tell you during our meeting was that I would always have a flower pot on my windowsill, and so that's how this cover got approved, again by such a beautiful accident that happened. This is another piece of fiction by Anjum Hassan. It is a collection of 14 well-crafted stories that give us a sense of the daily life of the wide cast of characters. Quixotic non-conformists in small towns and young newlywed trying to keep up with the times, Anjum's protagonists are always inward-looking, whimsical and vulnerable outliers. Where is their place in this new order, where they come from and where they are going? Quietly devastating and subtly submersive, the stories are increasingly the good address for the authentic Indian fiction. When I read this book, me and Anjum, we had a meeting, and she said she is very close to this one particular painting by this artist called Bhupen Kakkar called Air, Steam and Water. I looked up at that painting, and it's a very boxy, very beautiful, but of course I found it a bit boxy for the cover. And why I particularly picked up this option to show to this group today is that design is just not about making something look beautiful and making it work, but it is also very much part of what goes in making that happen. So I looked up at that painting and I sort of dissected it and figured out a geometry that sort of relates to the interiorness of the character that the book talks about. Did this, coupled it with some solid chunks, kept simple classic typography. Anjum liked it, sales liked it, the cover got approved. And I thought, wow, this was easy. I never thought, Anjum will be so easy to manage. But who knew that the main task was just about to begin? And I went to the National Gallery of Modern Art to find the rights for the picture and to find the high resolution picture. They said we don't have it. We have all of Kakkar's work, but not this one in particular. They said you may try at Kiran Nadar Museum. I tried there. It wasn't available with them as well. They said you should try with MoMA in New York, and I wrote to MoMA. It wasn't there. Then I was sent off to somewhere in China, strangely, and China forwarded me somebody to Singapore, and Singapore sent me back that this should be with NGMA in India, and this whole thing took me 1 month, and by now I think it had hit my ego, and I was like, I have to make sure that I absolutely clear permission for this particular painting for the cover. And I continued to chase, and Anjum was chasing at her end and I was chasing at my end, and then eventually somebody said that it may be worth trying Sotheby's in London. And I wrote to them and they had the permission, they had the artwork and they had the rights of this painting with them. By now it took me some 3 months where I was pushed from pillar to post to clear the permission for this artwork in particular, and this is how then this cover came into life. I'm also someone who loves to create my own imagery, because creating something that is creating something with what is readily available seems like an easy task to me. So whenever there is a chance, I love to create my own imagery. Like you saw, even in Anjum's, I didn't use the painting directly. For this one, these are basically essays on Ram Guha's work, and the idea was to it's a hard subject. I mean, this is like an anthology, and how do you depict, because the book talked about a variety of essays that he wrote from ecology to equity and social histories of Indian cricket and history of Indian Republic, biography of Gandhi, anthology of ecology, social political thoughts in India. So the subject was so vast for the designer to capture it in one possible image. And I was passing by my production department, and I saw these blank dummies that we get for books, and they were just piled up there. I passed by and something happened in that moment, and I went back and I said, can I borrow these if you are done with them? And this is how then I started fiddling with them, and the title that you see, I actually scribbled on the edges to make the visual for this cover. This is another piece of fiction I did. It was simultaneously published in US and UK, but we wanted to do our own covers, so we decided to create one in India. The book talks about when a classmate goes missing, protagonist Jay decides to use the crime-solving skills he has picked up from TV to find him. He asks Pari and Faiz to be his assistants, and together they draw up the list of people to interview and places to visit. But what begins as a game turns sinister as other children start disappearing from their neighborhood. As the disappearance edge ever closer to home, the lives of Jay and his friends will never be the same again. Essentially, I was playing on this idea of appearance and disappearance in the book, and if you see the hard copy, some of the kids have UV on them and some of them are without UV, so that it plays on the aspect of appearance and disappearance. Maybe many of you have seen this cover already. When my publisher called to again, I mean this book was to be globally published, and we decided, I didn't like the UK cover at all, so we said we'll do our own version of the cover. When she called me to discuss I'm a morning person, I start very early, and so does she. She phoned me and I went to her room, and she said, here is Amitav's novel, and she felt she had read much before me, and she said, I think one central element that will work well on this cover is King Cobra. God help me, I have huge phobia of reptiles. And one side you have agreed that you want to design a cover for Amitav, also because I'm a big fan of his work, and on the other side you have this personal challenge that you can't even look at images of snakes. I mean, forget of like designing a cover with a picture. And it took me a few days to sort of really, come up with ideas how to attempt this, but I think that's what designers are drilled with, to figure out solutions to problems, and this was partly personal and partly professional problem. And then I thought, how about getting an artwork which is so pretty in nature that just sort of works for both the parties. And then I commissioned this illustrator in Bangalore, and I think she did a fabulous job of painting this king cobra in such a way that I actually, when the artwork came in, I was not scared for a bit to look at it, to use it, to integrate type into it. And it was just so much of fun, and I showed it to my publishers, sales. Everybody instantly loved the cover. And then it went to Amitav, and as luck would have it, he approved it in one go without a singular feedback on the cover. Okay, this cover I did, I think, in 2016 or 17 sometime, and till date it remains supremely special to me. I'll give you a little bit of story. This is existence in the city. He decided to give it all up and take up organic farming in a small town near Mumbai. But it wasn't easy. With no experience in agriculture, his journey was fraught with uncertainty. From negotiating tough clients, strict deadlines and traffic to looking forward to his first bumper crop of moong. As he battled erratic weather conditions and stubborn farm animals, he discovered a world with fresh air and organic food, one where he could lead a more wholesome existence. At times hilarious, other times profound, this book follows his extraordinary story. I was reading this manuscript almost at the end of it, and that week, and I was flying back from Dehradun to Delhi, and the approach, I think that day the flight took was from Noida, and from the top you see these fields. If you see from the plane down, you see these divisions of land, and with different shades of greens and reds and yellows. And I was looking through the window, and something happened, and I was like, yeah, fine. Then I reached home, and the next morning when I reached on my desk, and I saw when I was keeping my bag, and I saw the keypad, and the idea clicked, and I knew what had happened. So the minute IT guys came in, I went and I took a defunct keyboard from them, and I went to Lajpat Nagar and bought this architectural grass, and I stuck on the keypad to just marry both the components of the book. And this is the visual that came up. Sorry. And Venkat, when we sent the cover to Venkat, he was so pleased, and in his letter back, he wrote back, I could never imagine that there could be an interpretation of my work, visual interpretation of my work in such a beautiful way. And in some small ways, I feel very proud of this cover. These are two other books that I designed for the same author, and why I'm showing you is that how there could be different visual personalities from the same author. So some 5 years apart, Indica is the first definitive natural history of the Indian subcontinent, and it's filled with fierce reptiles, dinosaurs, mammals and amazing plants. It includes a rare collection of images, illustrations and maps. Renelal tells the story with verve, lucidity and an infectious enthusiasm that comes from his deep, abiding love of nature. Basically, again, this book was a challenge like Ram Guha's essays, because there was so much in this book. Where do you focus? What do you include and what do you exclude? And therefore, I played upon the idea of land, water and sky, and tried to put up this collage with very clear typography, which gives you very non-fiction feel. It's an illustrated book. It's a giant one in full color, and we produced it beautifully on a textured paper. Invisible Empire just came in a few months back, and this one, possibly the most enigmatic of living things. Viruses are something not considered a life form at all. Everything about them is extreme, including the reactions they evoke. However, for every truism about viruses, the opposite is also true. It brings together science, history, and great storytelling to paint a fascinating picture of viruses as a major actor, not just in human civilization, but also in the human body. With rare photographs, paintings, illustrations, and anecdotes, it is a magnificent and an extremely relevant book of our times, where we are attempting to understand viruses and examining their roles in our lives of humans. So naturally one would start by putting viruses on the cover. And we had a very interesting debate with sales, publisher, editor. The world was so fatigued seeing that typical image of a coronavirus with spikes on it, and though I had an idea how to sort of interpret it with post-press effects and all, but still I have to admit that yes, I was using viruses on the cover, and publisher felt that how about we actually pick elements from the book and not talk about virus at all. Bringing a book on virus during such tough times and putting viruses on it may just kill the book completely. And I felt that was such a beautiful sort of a brief to a designer, and I was absolutely sold for that idea, and I composed this. Of course, these images, he talks about viruses in all these species within the book, so it is very much within the peripheries of the context inside, but it doesn't mention virus at all. We just put it in the subtitle. This is again an interesting one, that this is about plague. This is about tuberculosis, and the book traces the history of tuberculosis from slums of 19th century New York to modern Mumbai. The narrative shows how superstition and folk remedies made way for scientific understanding of TB, such that it was controlled and cured in the West. Phantom Plague is an urgent, riveting and fascinating narrative that deftly exposes the weakest links in our battle against this ancient foe. Again, this book was simultaneously published in US, and when I looked at the US cover, it was so drab that I felt that it wouldn't work for the Indian market. I also knew that considering the subject, the imagery would be challenged, because you just put scientific images on it, or you can't put lungs on it photographically. I had this idea. I was following somebody on Instagram who does these really amazing 3D structural cutouts, and I approached him, and we talked a little bit, and I briefed him, and this is the imagery that he finally composed, and I used it to design the cover. Fulsungi, this is basically first translation of a Bihari novel into English, and was a cover which I think I designed in some 2 hours, because we just bought the rights and we really wanted to put it out there in the market. Sometimes I think working under pressure also helps a lot. So this is an example of that. Again, there were the reason for this one in particular, maybe particularly graphic design guys would relate to this. I didn't particularly put faces on the cover because I didn't have the time to go and commission somebody, because highly unlikely one would find exact images that will correspond to the narrative in the book. So definitely for work of fiction you have to commission, but that would take really long, from briefing to getting drafts to getting color drafts to getting everyone's feedback. So I took an approach that just worked with elements. Sorry guys, I'm going to rush now, because this is a series we designed for Premchand. Again, the challenge was that all the existing books on Premchand, mostly in Hindi, they had a very boring covers and very stale by now. So since his stories revolved around villages and the rural lives, we decided to take elements and trees that exist in the rural India, and we composed these covers. Again, I commissioned someone to do these artworks for us. This is an example. When I do, somebody in the morning was asking me, when I create a cover, I want all the elements to work together in totality, but also to work independently. And I think this is a good example to capture that each book works independently, but also when you put together it, you get the overall canvas. How sometimes you can transform really boring content with something which is very exciting. So this, as you know, this is a book on colonial secularism in India, and the main ideas that come to you are about maps, etc., etc. But it was nostalgic for me. I recollected that we used to have these posters back on the summer holidays, which we used to cut animals and plants. So I just used that and designed this cover using that imagery. 5-6 years back, and the idea was to give a new lease of life to the already published content. And I was inspired by the Jali works in the Indian forts and palaces, especially around Rajasthan. And I wish I could show you a hard printed cover. All the gold that you see is bronze foil, and some of the colored mirror work that you see got UV on it, so when you take it has a shimmering effect, but not everywhere it has been sort of peppered all through. This is of course Jhumpa's cover that I recently designed and very close to me. And this book, if some of you have read, talks about the idea of solitude and longing and belonging, and that was the central idea. Jhumpa's work, I think, is so strong that you honestly, it's any designer's delight to design for her. You don't have to really push many things, but work with the simplicity, keeping the classicness of her own persona and her writings, and that's exactly what I try to translate here. And the last one is Women Dreaming. This book is set in a tiny Muslim village in Tamil Nadu, which talks about the lives of these women, women who are sustained by faith they have in themselves, in each other, and the everyday compromise they make. Salma's storytelling crystallizes simplicity, patient in its unraveling, enters this interior world of women held together by love, demarcated by religion, comforted by the courage in dreaming of better futures. Again, I was not sure to put imagery of women and what you put and what aspect of the narrative you really bring to the cover to make it a strong visual, and therefore I decided to take a slightly abstract route that sort of, it's like the lives that she talks about are interwoven. And but the challenge with such images is that how do you write on them? So you have to find out clever ways of picking visual elements that would sort of support the imagery. And therefore, if you see, I very cleverly integrated these circles and then also peppered some small circles to sort of continue the visual language through and through. Thank you.
Thanks, that was very informative, very interesting, and it was very fascinating to hear the stories behind each of the covers. Some of them I have seen. We have at least one of them in our library. I think we have Women Dreaming, and Jhumpa Diaries, Whereabouts also I have seen in bookstores. So, and it really stood out to me in the bookstore and in the library. So it's wonderful to hear the thought process behind it, for me as well as I'm sure for many people here. We have about 15 minutes. I'll ask you maybe 2-3 questions and then we can open it up to the audience. So what we looked at right now was just such a wide variety of covers. I mean, it almost feels as if you are a whole different person every time you approach a book. So are there any common threads, and if so, what makes the book cover yours, so to speak?
Right. I think when you work for an organization, you cannot, or at least I would like to believe, I cannot have one particular style that is my signature, because you are I use this term, I'm a generalist when you're working for a publishing house, because I may have Gulzar on my table today, and then tomorrow morning I have Ram Guha, and then third day I may have a lifestyle book to look into. So the personalities of each book is so different and so varied that I cannot say that a similar approach would work on all of them, is one. Two, the only signature, if I may say, that I have is a principle that I work on, that every cover should have strength and clarity. And by strength, I mean visual and textual strength to hold your attention. And by clarity, I mean the level of clear communication it will offer to the reader. These two principles are completely non-negotiable to me. And Women Dreaming is an example that one can try putting text on the image, but it will never work. And therefore, you have to continue finding a solution that would sort of justify the design approach on such a cover.
So almost as an inverse to that question, what are maybe some of the common mistakes that people make, or you also describe some of the book covers as boring or bad. So what are some of the things that make book covers so and should be avoided perhaps?
Well, let me rephrase it. What are the things I keep in mind? I think where one goes wrong is probably you haven't read the book. So if you really want to design a cover, you must read the book. Having said that, not that I have read every book, but I have definitely read the synopsis, and I may get an idea, okay, how I want to position it. But in cases where I have not read the whole book, I would like to have some really detailed conversations with editors, with the authors. And now I have this mantra to myself that to visually communicate strongly, you also need to verbally communicate very strongly. And therefore, communication at every level is just so pertinent to what you do. So yeah, I think reading really helps, because it also informs your argument. When you argue with a sales representative or a marketing guy or even your editor, the arguments are more informed and educated because they are backed by the reading that you have had. So, and all this what you saw wasn't that easy. I mean, I just walked you in like 30 minutes, but of course we may have had heated discussions on several things, on fonts and images and even overall approaches, but just because you have read the content, you can fight better. References help to show that what I want to do, especially in commissioned work, when you commission artworks outside, you got to be careful because someone is spending their time and energy on it, and also it's going to cost you. Even if you reject the artwork, you have to pay a kill fee. So budget is also something you have to keep in mind. So yeah.
Also, who are some of your favorite graphic designers? It's a quick list.
Right. I love Adrian Shaughnessy, because he's also a designer and a design thinker and a writer, and I really respect his writings. Peter Mendelsohn, who was a designer at Knopf office in New York, and he is with Atlantic right now, also because he's a pianist. And I have huge respect for Irma Boom.
And piano playing is one of your newer interests, isn't it?
Well, it's been 7 years by now.
But possibly newer than your interest in design.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So also you've been in touch with so many eminent authors, most eminent of authors, and were you ever interested in writing a book yourself?
Well, I never thought about that, like from conscious perspective, that I have to write a book. But I think, as they say, company matters, and being surrounded by individual of words, authors, editors, I think I started appreciating the art and the beauty in writing, and beauty packed within words. So I started writing for my, I paint also, guys, and I sometimes put up shows. So writing for your shows, etc. And I just found it quite fascinating. And so yes, during the lockdown, I was just writing few things from my walks, and will come back and just paint or just sketch, and something started happening. So yes, there will be a book to expect in December this year.
Wow, you must come back to Baatein to promote your book. We would love to host you again. Have you had any sort of interesting interactions with readers For example, I am someone who really judges books by their covers, but are there others like me, and what has been your experience?
Yes, I think the one that I absolutely clearly remember was this is around Room on the Roof again, guys. This is the Delhi Book Fair, which happens in January every year. This was this must be January of 27, and we have a penguin. We as a group we get a big stall, like some four five stalls clubbed together. So therefore, every division has to pitch in to support sales there by stacking books, because you know the stall gets very crowded during the day, and also to help a buyer to find a book, etc. So you are given duties. Design will go on Monday, sales will go on Tuesday, editorial will go on Wednesday, etc., etc. So I was on duty this day, and our hall was packed, and I had this duo, brother and sister, very young brother and sister, probably I would say end of college, end of school, beginning of college, and they have a pile collected to purchase, and they had Room on the Roof in their hands, because this just came, I think, in that December of 16. And they were debating that, you know, listen, we fell short of money, and but the brother says that I really want to buy this one, and sister wasn't sure, and she's not ready to give away any book from her pile. And imagine, I'm listening, they're just right behind me, and the brother says, I really love this cover, and I really want to buy this book. And just imagine, you have designed that, and someone who is completely unknown to you, and vice versa. My heart melted, and I turned back and I said, do you really want this book? And they're like, yeah. So I said, yeah, sure, let's go to the counter. We went to the counter, and we get employee discount. And so I gave them the employee discount, and then I bought them the book. And that experience I still remember, because someone genuinely loved your work so much, because selling is hardest. So if somebody is actually putting money to your work, I think that was the most beautiful feeling I have had with my readers.
So guys, if you loved any of those covers, he has an employee discount.
What will I get in return?
That's something that you should deal with. I mean, they're all budding designers here, so that's something you should figure out.
It's a good matter.
Thank you so much for taking the time, for being so generous with your time, with your stories. If it were up to me, I would love to hear the story behind each of the 800 covers, but I think that would require a lot more time. So thank you so much. That was really fascinating. That's all from me. But if anybody in the audience has any questions for Gunjan.
How do you approach them, and what brief do you give to an illustrator about the book? Do you if an illustrator is making something, he will or she will definitely read the book, but if you want in some particular way, do you give any brief to the illustrator? So I want to know that. How do you approach an illustrator?
Yeah, certainly. So I think first I read the cover brief, and cover brief comes to me from editors. I will see what sort of an illustration would work for this content. So is it Jumpa's work, is it Perumal Murugan's work, or is it Ramchand's work? So you saw there are different styles of illustrations, and accordingly you know whom you can sort of reach out, and thanks to Instagram, etc., that you follow lots of illustrators and creative individuals, and you accordingly approach them and just propose the project. And of course you do share the cover brief with them, and I try to make it as clear and as comprehensive as possible, so that there's no wastage of time and efforts. And references are a great place to start with, because even an individual illustrator can render 10 styles. So it's best to give them clear instructions what is expected in terms of textures, colors, compositions, and also when the rough comes in, I'm going to put my typography on it and send it back to you, so that there's enough and clear room for title, etc. to come in.
So how much time basically like one book cover take to do all that thing? Like it is an illustration based most.
Right. Ideally, we hope for 4 months, but it entirely depends. Do we have the luxury of 4 months, or for whatever reason are we trying to publish that book sooner? So I also put timelines and budgets when I approach the illustrator. Sometimes they are not available, so I do have to go to my choice B.
Thank you.
I was curious as to what appeal Penguin Random House had to you. You mentioned that how you got there and you really loved it. Like personally, how I found out about Penguin Random House was through Puffin books. Their series of young adult novels that I devoured back in school. So what was the appeal that Penguin Random House had to you that made you so like I want to get in there, like that?
I think the first book that I read or saw from Penguin was Delhi's Not Far. It's a very slim book by Ruskin born, and it was a gorgeous cover. It's a photographic cover, and again, as I said, the logo it's a tiny thing tucked in like one corner on the cover, but it has so much of power to just draw me to it. And even till date, I'm sorry, but I couldn't figure what it is in there for me, and it continues to attract me. Maybe it's the authenticity of the brand, maybe it's the legacy, but there is something in there. The day I figure it out, I'll certainly let you know.
Alright. So it's just the appeal, so it wasn't...
Appears also, and it's a great place to work. I mean, Penguin has a great legacy in terms of design, in terms of editorial, in terms of everything. It is such a renowned, such a successful, and a great place to work at. Also, we work 5 days.
Okay, that sounds like a pretty nice. So in terms of your appeal, you would say it is more towards the art side of the actual publishing aspect, and maybe like the choice of books, like in terms of what they publish.
I think absolutely, because Penguin is new in India, but Penguin is like some 120-year-old company, and if you look back the history, I think it did appeal to, it must have appealed to me at some level, that even after being rejected for an internship, I still knocked at the door for a freelance cover, and I continued to knock, and definitely I think the legacy really helped. Because when I think, I can't even imagine myself in any other publishing house. So if I quit Penguin, I think I'll quit publishing. I'll quit publishing design.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe like try to figure out what exactly Penguins makes it Penguin and start a publishing house yourself, maybe.
Well,
Maybe that figure that exact origin.
sorry dude, my dad or me, we don't have deep pockets to start a publishing house. Sorry.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I'm writing one book. And then also fortunate, yeah, I think additional feather is that Penguin just accepted my book. So it went through the proper channels of acquisitions, guys, also not because I'm Penguin's employee, so they had a soft corner for me and they said, let's publish it. No, it was presented at acquisitions meeting where sales, marketing, CEO, publishers all sit, and then they critique a book and see the numbers would work, etc. Because we are trade publishers, we are not university press. So numbers also have to work for the book, for us, for a book to commission the book.
Do you ever get creative block, and what you do about it?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Intuition helps, and off late what I've started doing is that just drop the project at that point of time, come back and look into it. Yeah, it happens all the time.
Thank you.
Alright, that's all the time we have. Okay, one last question.
Hello. Yeah, first of all, thank you for the insightful session. So I had a question. So when a brief comes to you, like how does it look like? Does it like already have a little bit of like the like author's ideas or something in it, or like how does it look like? Can you describe how a brief to you?
Yeah, it's a straightforward A4 sheet with a lot of text in it, with title, subtitle, book size, price, etc., territory. synopsis of the book and some inputs. There's a column for author inputs, there's a column for sales inputs, because that it sort of helps designer to sort of plan their work accordingly. So and then if you don't find it sufficient, sometimes they also put references of a similar book in that genre. So that's how a cover brief looks like. But in case I don't find it sufficient, I always sort of email back and ask for a few chapters to read, or maybe in cases of fiction, whole manuscript to read.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Alright, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much, Gunjan. That was a great session. Can we please have a round of applause? And thank you to all of you for coming. It's nearly a full house. So thanks. Let's have another round of applause. Yeah. And Tarun is here. Thank you, Tarun, because you introduced Gunjan and his work to us. And I also want to invite you to just say a few words as we conclude. Yes, please.
Hi, Gunjan.
Okay, so thank you, Rahi, and thank you each one of you. Please sit. I know there's another thing lined up after this conversation, so I'll be very, very brief. I don't need to introduce him at all, but I came running from another meeting because, you know, it's always a very, very proud moment to see your own alumni, your own student reaching out to the whole world. Just give me a moment. This mask thing is a little this thing. So, Gunjan and me had a very, very light conversation, obviously, at the Chai Gate many, many years ago. And the gist of that conversation was that it is only on publications that the designer's name is printed for eternity, till the time the book lasts, right? Branding projects, of course, other websites cover and things like that. So, I think I need to thank you to have been courageous enough to come to Ahmedabad in the heat. Yeah. गर्मी इतनी हो गई है कि even when we sign off our emails, I at least question के warm regards लिखना चाहिए कि नहीं लिखना चाहिए. थोड़ा literal हो जाता है. But I am so excited that Baatein has come back to a fully hybrid mode. So some of you guys are lucky to listen to speakers and stalwarts and experienced people like him here. But many of you guys are also connecting through the online forum. And the best part of what these guys have cracked is that even if people like me who missed your, I'm sure it was amazing. Was it amazing? Yes. Okay. So many of them would again want to revisit your conversation on YouTube channel of Baatein and other forums. Thank you so much, Gunjan. Yeah, we'll continue our conversation later.